The White Sox front office seems more interested in trying to develop players other teams have given up on, and even worse, play bad veterans over their young players. Let's discuss why this is baffling with my guest next on Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert of Southside Showdown, part of the Fansided Network. You can check out my written content at SouthsideShowdown.com, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And make sure to hit that like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, follow or subscribe to the show on wherever you get your podcasts, as Locked On White Sox is available via audio on places such as Apple and Spotify. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. And the White Sox recalled Bryan Ramos for a day and then sent him down in favor of a recently claimed Jacob Amaya, an infielder two organizations have now given up on. I'll discuss with my guest Elijah Evans from FutureSox and Just Baseball why this continued reliance on trying to go with other teams' failed prospects and bad veterans is bad process and just plain out baffling. And he was also in Charlotte and Kannapolis a couple weeks ago. So we'll discuss that in the second and third segments. And Elijah, does it make any sense to have Jacob Amaya on the big league roster over Bryan Ramos?
You know, Todd, I don't think it does. I don't think you think it does. And frankly, you know, it wasn't. The reality of the situation is Ramos was always intended to be a one-day thing. It sounds like he was up there to fill a spot until Amaya got there. So it wasn't like he was actually really truly recalled. He was just there for a day to fill a roster spot. It's just the same story we've been seeing for the past 2 months now. I mean, we're seeing the same thing over and over, where the organization continues to not lean into the youth and instead try to find diamonds in the rough from DFAs and waivers and other teams, basically, you know, guys they've let go, right? So it's this continual thing that we keep seeing throughout the season, and it doesn't make sense to me. I think at the end of the day, you're taking away development time that could be used to give these pieces of the future the ability to learn about the big leagues and find themselves at that level, right? So you're in a position now where you've got guys who, going into 2025, you've got a lot of prospects who are seemingly going to be pieces of the future, but you don't know what you have there really is the reality, right? Like there's guys at all over in Charlotte and Birmingham, but especially in Charlotte, there's tons of guys on that roster that the team will want to be part of the future, but you're not giving a chance to get a taste of that. And I get the argument partially of like, you don't want to put guys in the situation this team is in right now. You know, you don't want to put the pressure on these young guys to avoid the all-time, you know, loss record, whatever it is. I don't really care. At this point, I don't know if you agree with this. I know you kind of don't agree with this, I think, but I don't really care if they break the record. It doesn't matter to me. I think at this point, it honestly, probably more than anything, would embarrass the team enough where it might force them to do a little bit more in the offseason, right? I don't think it matters. I think what matters is trying to figure out who can be a piece for the future. And Ramos is one of those guys who he has over a 900 OPS in August right now in Charlotte. He's hitting exceptionally well. He's been in his groove. It's a month, almost 2 months now since he fully got back from his injury, that he's been hitting really well, playing all around baseball down in Charlotte. His approach has gotten better. He looks more confident at the plate. He's taking better pitches. There's a lot of things going the right direction for him. Give him the spot. I don't see the reasoning not to right now, personally.
Well, the reason why I said I've been vehemently opposed to them breaking the 120 game 20 game loss record is, they're not going to get the first or second pick. I think Jerry Reinsdorf has a high threshold for being embarrassed, and they're following bad process. I would be just opposed for the first two reasons if they were following better process, as you said, if they were playing their younger players. Because wouldn't it be better to have Ramos, Brooks Baldwin at shortstop just to see, can he be a potential starting shortstop, of course, if Colson Montgomery can't win the job, and Miguel Vargas at second base to be your starting infield for the rest of the season over, say, Lenyn Sosa, where may you be loved like Grady Sizemore loves Lenyn Sosa, and Nicky Lopez with Jacob Amaya as your utility player? Wouldn't it be just better to go with Ramos, Baldwin, and Vargas the rest of the year?
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I mean, I think that the situation with Ramos, right, is I think that Ramos is a guy that, can be legit third baseman, right? Like he has shown to be a solid defender there, even probably above average there, actually, especially in the last year or two, he's really developed with his glove. His hands are really quick. He's got the arm strength. His throws can get a little sloppy at times, but generally this is a guy that looks like he can be a major league caliber third baseman, which we haven't seen from Miguel Vargas so far. So in that case, I know Vargas had struggled at second base when he came up as well, but I would rather just let Vargas start to work at second base when you have a guy that can actually be an everyday third baseman potentially in Ramos, right? So I completely agree on that point. I think that, guys like Baldwin, guys like Ramos should be getting those innings. Sosa, he deserves some innings, but at the same time, I'm not sure we're going to see it from him. It's been, we really haven't seen much from him. We've seen a few bursts here and there. Maybe he needs everyday innings too, which is fine, but it's like, you've got a lot of guys that you want to get innings, and I just don't see how Jacob Amaya is one of those guys that really fits. I feel like at the end of the day, it's just continually just trying things and hoping they may work while also, refusing to really lean into the youth and just lean into the struggle right now and just let it become about the future. I think that's been the story of the entire roster this season. I mean, the whole bullpen is DFAable in my opinion, pretty much, aside from one or two guys. And you've got guys in Charlotte who are lighting it up in the bullpen and are just sitting there for no reason. And I think we'll talk about it when we get to Charlotte too, but like, that's the story of this entire team right now, is not letting the youth be the story and just trying to make this season better when it's terrible. There's no way to make it seem like this season isn't terrible, because it is. This is going to be one of the worst seasons, if not the worst season in Major League Baseball history. Like, I don't think that can be understated, right? Like, who cares at this point? Just let the guys work, see who you have going forward. A month of development, you have no idea what that could do for some of these young players going into next season. A month of quality MLB innings under their belt.
Also, isn't this a sign that you're basically saying to your guys, we don't trust you, we don't like you, we don't prefer you? I'd rather go with Senzel, who was, yes, a once bright prospect, see if I can salvage his career. What does that say to the rest of your system?
It sends a message to your prospects that you don't think they're ready and you don't think they're capable enough. And maybe they're not ready, right? Like, if this is truly the perspective of like, oh, we just don't think these guys are ready, that's one thing. But I just don't think that's the truth. I just don't believe that. I think there's guys that you can look at and they check every box. And Ramos is a guy that you already started his clock earlier this year because you brought him up due to a terrible roster management situation, right? He came up originally because they poorly managed the 40-man roster and they didn't have any other options to go with. So they forced him up early in his career when he wasn't ready. And then you saw a little bit of excitement, and then he struggled a lot, and then he got hurt, right? And then it's like, oh, okay, let's reset. Let's get him back to Charlotte, get him comfortable. It took him about a month to settle back in after the injury. The last month and a half, he's been dominating. That's the player that you say, hey, we see your improvements. You deserve a chance to get some major league innings under your belt going into 2025 and try to earn a job next season on this roster, right? Like, that's the type of player. He's already on the 40-man, right? He's been on the 40-man all season. That's the type of player you reward for his growth and his development over the past month or two. But they're just not. And there's other guys like that. He's one of many, right? This is not the only guy in this situation.
Yeah, someone who sort of got rewarded, but now is getting demoted. Ty Bush, smart decision to have him work his issues out at AAA or not?
Yeah, I like the promotion of Bush. I think it was an okay time to do it because you needed a rotation spot. He's one of the older prospects in Charlotte, and he's had a really good season. Definitely still some things to work on for Bush. This is a guy who only had, a few AAA starts under his belt, right? He came up a little bit aggressively, probably to a degree. I think there were some good signs. I just think in general the command wasn't there for Bush, so you kind of need to get his command working a little bit. At the end of the day, I would have been fine either way. I wouldn't have minded him making a few more starts because, again, the starts are not they don't matter, right? Like, him struggling a little more wouldn't have really mattered, but at the same time, I'm also okay with it. I see both sides of that one. I think I am okay with that demotion because the command really didn't get there at all in his first handful of big league starts. So I'm okay with that one, generally speaking.
Yeah. The only reason why I'm like with you, I talked about on yesterday's show where I'm like 50-50. The only reason is it just means Chris Flexen is still on this team. That's the only reason. I'm like, why is Chris Flexen still here? Well, anyway, Eliza was in Charlotte a couple of weeks ago. Let's discuss if Colson Montgomery can still be a foundational player for the Sox or not next on Locked On White Sox. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. And PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the PrizePicks community today. Done with making White Sox selections and you're ready for the Bears? One Caleb Williams passing yard gets you 1 win on PrizePicks every week in September. That's right, only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. 4 weeks of free W's. Don't miss this deal on PrizePicks because it's gone when September ends. And PrizePicks is available in more than 30 states across the country, including Illinois, Wisconsin, and Indiana. Again, my buddy who on the text chain lives behind that cheddar curtain loves how he gets to use PrizePicks to get his selections in. I think PrizePicks is neat for easy and how simple it is to play. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive that $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. And thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, enjoy Locked On MLB podcast. Host Paul Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully, is here daily to provide national expertise with his trademark humor to help you get ready for the MLB playoffs here in the dog days of summer. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day on Locked On MLB, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And the White Sox play the second game of a 3-game set against the Texas Rangers tonight. The first pitch is at 7:10 p.m. Central Standard Time. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. Just full disclosure, the Sox are in a rain delay as I'm recording this the night before, so it could be a doubleheader. Who knows? Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I am your host, Todd Welter. Make sure to hit that like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. If you can't catch the show on YouTube, follow or subscribe to the show on wherever you get your podcast. As Locked On White Sox is available via audio on places such as Apple and Spotify. And Elijah, my guest, Elijah Evans from FutureSox and Just Baseball, where can we always find your great work?
Appreciate that, Todd. At Elijah EV8 on X is where I kind of post everything I'm working on, my articles, interviews, all that stuff. And then JustBaseball.com will be a lot of my written work, as well as FutureSox too.
And speaking of like great content, you went to Charlotte and then you also went to Kannapolis a couple weeks ago. How did Colson Montgomery look? And how did Colson Montgomery look? That's where I first want to kick off.
Yeah, it was a great trip. It was fun to get down there. First of all, it was just cool to get to talk to a lot of these guys. Colson has had a rough season, right? Like that's a given, right? Like we know that the numbers don't lie, generally speaking, right? Like it's been rough. He's been adjusting his approach. He's been facing different type of pitching than he's been used to, right? But this is a guy that, first from just the standpoint of just mentality, right? From talking to him, like he seems very level-headed with all of it, which is something that, it can be easy for guys to get down on himself. And I think he is taking the approach of like, this is learning and he's growing and he's figuring it out. And, he hasn't really had to deal with any challenges through his career at this point, right? Like he dominated in high school. He breezed through the lower levels of the minor leagues last year. Even though he was hurt part of the year, he was having really good performances, good numbers, right? Like this is the first year of his entire baseball career that he's really, truly struggled. And that's something that is not easy to do. And it's not easy to work through. And I think he's someone who is taking it in stride and understands that he's just got to keep grinding and, figure out where to take all these struggles and how to adjust constantly. I'm trying to think of the way to put this. I don't get the whole jumping on the wagon of like, he's not going to be a good player. I just think that's really overreactive of a lot of fans. And I think it can be easy to be that way when the organization set him up this way, right? Like this is a guy that shouldn't have started in AAA. He had less than 150 minor league games under his belt this season as a high school draft pick because of the injuries the past 2 years. He should have been in AA to start the year. And he probably would have been off to a stronger start there in Birmingham because it's a place he was used to. Putting him in Charlotte off the bat, as opposed to some of the other guys at his kind of level that were in Birmingham, right? Set him up for the situation where he was expected to get to the major leagues this year. That became the expectation when the White Sox put him in AAA to start the season. That's really not a fair expectation. This year didn't need to be a major league call-up for Colson, especially with the way the White Sox are playing. This is a developmental season. And I know that the numbers don't look as good as you want them to, but the power is there. We're seeing a lot of the power tapped into him. His exit velocities when he gets a hold of the ball is excellent. He has home runs. He has doubles, right? Like there is some general positives when you look at his numbers. His walk rate is down, but he still kind of has that approach. It looks like he's generally trying to do more damage, which is something he talked to me about a little bit. And he has done some damage. It has resulted in a strikeout rate that's much higher than he's ever had in his career. At the same time, he's also facing pitchers that are not pitching to him the way that they used to. He was a guy that, when he would get his fastballs, he would mash them. He would be really patient with the off speed. There's guys working off speed pitches that are actually strikes to him in a way that he's never had to deal with facing. So I think it's a constant approach adjustment that he's been having to make due to just the level of pitching he's facing. You're facing big league level pitchers when you're in AAA, right? These are guys with big league experience a lot of the time. So it's not the same thing as when you're in the minors and you've got guys who are developing and they're trying to work on their stuff. Guys in AAA, especially some of the big league vets, right? Their job is to get you out. They're not working on their own stuff more than they're working on getting you out. And specifically the type of hitter he is getting targeted and getting pitched to in a different way than he's ever been used to. So, there were some positive signs. I think he's had some good solid games in the past 2 weeks. And especially when I was in person, I saw a good game or two from him. Generally the numbers don't look great, but I think it's a little bit over exaggerating, from a lot of people in the White Sox world right now that are looking at the numbers and saying, he's just not a good prospect, because this is still a top 50 prospect in Major League Baseball. And this is still a guy with a ton of power, generally speaking, good feel to hit, someone who can handle shortstop, hasn't been great there, but can handle shortstop. And at worst case is a very good third baseman potentially. And I think, the expectation we're probably getting a little bit off the charts for him. And I think he's pushed a little bit to start the season. So where I'm at with him is I still believe this is a major league everyday piece and someone who can be a very core piece of the future. It's just this year is about development for him, and there was no reason to rush him. And I hope that it kind of continues that way, and then he can go into next season fresh and continue to make the adjustments he needs to make in the offseason.
All right. So I'm glad you reinforced. I think Jim Callis, I heard on another prospect say, saying he should, this should be a development year. He should have probably started out at AA. So I'm glad that you said that. I'm also glad that you actually saw him play some better games, because anytime I've turned on Charlotte Knights games and he's up, it seems like he's just popping out or fouling off. That's just me seeing that. But I still think that he can be a big league player just like you. But why do you think he's going to be a good, reach his ceiling, where to me his floor is Paul DeYoung? That's his floor to me. And I know you tweeted out that you're confident that he's going to be an every big day player. Does that mean also that you're confident that he's going to reach his ceiling, which is superstar? Isn't that his ceiling, right?
That is his ceiling. I think that, it's easy to look at that ceiling and be really excited about it. But I also think that the reality of prospects is like, there are some superstar prospects that will never hit their ceiling, right? Like that is the situation. And I think his ceiling is probably a bit lower after this season. Like, I'll be honest, right? Like, I don't know if his ceiling is, perennial all-star type ceiling. I'm not sure if his ceiling ever really was that. I think it was easy for White Sox fans to see his archetype and say, this is our future star. And I get that. And I think he's really talented, but the ability to really just hit the ball hard is there, and is at a very high, like, star level of ability for him. I think the approach adjustments are going to have to come, because he was always a really refined hitter. He walked a ton the past few years, and we're not seeing that as much. So I think adjusting to more consistent breaking pitches and stuff that's in the zone but still breaking is something that he's had a hard time with this year, honestly. And I think he's going to have to continue making those adjustments. I don't know if I see him hitting, whatever this ceiling is. I do see him being an everyday player and one of the, one of their hitters in a lineup. I don't see him as an MVP. I see him as someone who can be an everyday infielder with a handful at least of all-star appearances throughout his career. I really do see that still being a possibility. And I think that's a likely possibility for him. So, there's a balance, right? I think a lot of people wanted to hitch it on like, this is our star. And that expectation is not really fair to put on anyone. But I do still think this is a guy that can be, a very good, one of the better hitters in a regular MLB lineup when things come together for him in a few years from now.
What was your impressions of catching prospect Edgar Quero, especially after you talked with him?
So unfortunately, Quero his injury that he's dealing with now, his back injury, was the second day I was there. So I really didn't get to see much of it in person, but this is a guy that I've been watching, for a year now. I saw him in person in Birmingham last year. I saw him in spring training, right? Like, talking with him, talking to some pitchers. Like, this is the catcher for the White Sox in 2025. I think that's pretty clear to me from watching him. He's going to be catching in. There is chance he'll be starting opening day in 2025. So Quero is someone I'm very high on. He talked about some videos.
All right, sorry for interrupting you there, Elijah. So again, just what's your impressions of Edgar Quero after talking with him, even though, yeah, he was hurt?
Yeah, so he was dealing with the injury, right? But I think this is a guy that's going to be catching in Chicago next year. I think it's become pretty clear from talking with him, with pitchers there, just everything in between, right? Like he has developed a lot in many ways. He's adjusted his swing this year. He's changed up some of his mechanics. He is tapping into power in a way that he wasn't last year, right? He's always had power, but now we're really seeing him impact the ball. He's changed kind of the way his backside works, where he's a little bit more narrow with his stance. He's getting his body through the zone. He's hitting better than he's ever hit in his career, frankly, from both sides of the plate, in addition to being a guy that has a really advanced approach and is going to get on base a ton because he walks a ton. Defensively, hearing pitchers talk about a catcher is a really important aspect, in my opinion, to evaluating a catcher. He looks generally better behind the plate, a little bit more mobile, but on top of that, it sounds like his game planning and his just, all of his decision making and his kind of approach to the game is really liked by all the pitchers there. Every single pitcher in Charlotte talked about it. They love working with him. He comes in with a plan. He works with them to really make sure they're thinking through everything, from his perspective, so he can help a pitcher succeed. It sounds like everybody loves working with him. He looks comfortable behind the plate prior to this injury, of course. They're going to take it easy with this little back injury. I'm not sure the extent of it really. He went on the IL. He said he felt fine. He was just dealing with some back soreness, but this is a guy who, regardless of what happens the next few weeks, even if he's out for the majority of the rest of the season, right? Like he's going to go into 2025 with a chance to earn the starting catching job in Chicago for the foreseeable future.
And he's the guy that you want to root for to win Rookie of the Year because you want that extra draft pick. That's just what I think there. Speaking of pitchers, before we go to the break, you talked with Jake Eder, or Eder. I always mispronounce his name. Is he destined to be more of a bullpen arm?
Yeah, I mean, Eder's a tough one. It's been a rough season, right? Like it's been really tough. He acknowledged, he was talking to me about how the fact that his early innings, he's really struggled in general. He's had a hard time kind of, getting strikes in the early counts. So he's been trying to throw more in the bullpen before games to get himself a little bit more into his flow before he even comes into the game. It's tough. The stuff is good. I mean, I've always thought this with Eder. This is a guy who, you can watch the pitches, and I was behind the plate during his start, kind of checking in and watching some of his stuff. Like he's got stuff. The curveball is really, really filthy when it's in the spots, and his slider has developed a lot of the last year from now. He mixes this kind of slider cutter type thing that has been effective. And, his fastball, when it's up in the zone and he can get that high velo up in the zone, it's not a bad pitch. And, he works in the changeup as well. Like he's got an arsenal of some really good stuff. It's just the command is just not there, unfortunately. I have for a while, I've kind of seen him as more of a reliever to an extent. I think that stuff could play up even more out of the bullpen, right? Like this is a guy that can drop in those curveballs and really let the fastball ride a little bit more if he's in a 1-2 inning spurt. I think you could see him get up to, 97, 98 again, like he did when he was younger. If he's in shorter spurts, in addition to that curveball really starting to play even better, I think it's a tough decision. But I lean a little bit more towards him being a reliever, but at the same time, they're probably going to finish out the year with him starting. Another starter as well that I was able to talk to and see for a while, who I've always been a big fan of, is Nick Nastrini, who, has made a ton of adjustments in the past few months, had a rough start in the big leagues. He acknowledges that. He knows that, right? He knows he struggled, but he's a guy who, I think is someone that has been really good now for 2 or 3 starts straight, and has made a lot of tweaks, little mechanical tweaks, just mentality, his sequencing in general, and looks like a lot more of the version of himself that he was in spring training coming out of the gates. So that's someone who, it's somewhat of a lost season for Nastrini. It's been a struggle for him, but I do think he's learned a lot this year, and I think he's still going to be either a potential starter or a bullpen piece come 2025.
Yeah, and that's the reason why too I'm not it's the end of the world that Kai Bush got demoted, because it looks like maybe Nastrini will get the promotion to take his spot. I just keep saying, get rid of Chris Flexen, and if you're going to shut down Garrett Crochet, there you go. You still got 2 bullpen. You got 2 starting rotations.
There's other spots, right? Sean Burke's another guy that Sean Burke looked really good in Charlotte. He's been great for the last month straight, and is another guy who you want to be part of your big league team. He was supposed to debut last year before he got hurt, so that's another guy you could bring up. Nastrini's available. There's options. There's plenty of pitchers that could use some innings at the big league level, and it would be much more beneficial to get those innings to guys over Flexen or over if you shut down Crochet, or even if you piggyback someone with Crochet.
Well, hey, I at least got rid of John Brebbia. I led the charge, and John Brebbia is gone. Well, let's discuss Elijah's trip to Kannapolis to check out stud hitting prospect George Wolkow and some of the other recent draft picks next on Locked On White Sox. All right, I made a huge mistake at the happiest place on earth. when I thought I packed my liquid IV, went to hydrate up on the first day, checked the suitcase, realized I did not pack my liquid IV. End result, I got severely dehydrated on the first day of my vacation that I went on 2 weeks ago. Had I loaded up on my liquid IV that day, I would have gotten hydrated with electrolytes, essential vitamins, and clinically tested nutrients from the #1 powdered hydration brand in America. Instead, I wasted a few hours at the first aid station when I could have hydrated up with the easy-to-use liquid IV. All you have to do with the liquid IV is tear, pour, live more. 1 stick plus 16 ounces of water hydrates better than water alone. 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drinks. 8 essential vitamins and nutrients. Blast off of the iconic summer flavor of Popsicle Firecracker, a festive blend of citrus-fueled lemon, lime, tart cherry, and raspberry flavors. And they've got plenty of other flavors if you go to liquidiv.com to choose from. No more thirsty summers when you indulge in hydration with Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use code MLB at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using code MLB at liquidiv.com. All right, so maybe you're done with the Sox and you want to see some good baseball over Labor Day weekend. Why not use Game Time to get tickets to the Dodgers versus Diamondbacks in Arizona? Because exclusively on Game Time, they have 50% off tickets to the Dodgers at Diamondbacks game on Labor Day. Hey, grab a last-minute flight and an Airbnb. Watch some good teams play at a nice park. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Game Time Picks makes it easier to save on sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. The lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. And the White Sox the White Sox played the Texas Rangers in the second game of a 3-game set tonight. The first pitch is at 7:10 p.m. Central Standard Time. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. And welcome back into Lockdown White Sox. I am your host, Todd Welter, here with Elijah Evans from FutureSox and Just Baseball. And Elijah, you took a trip to Charlotte, checked out the Knights, but you also checked out Kannapolis, the low A team. And how is it talking and seeing George Wolkow live?
Yeah. George is a character and someone that is a massive stature. Of course, I've talked to him, since he got drafted last year out of Downers Grove. He is the most impressive, young prospect from just a makeup standpoint. He is able to describe and talk and just explain everything he's working on better than almost every prospect I've talked to. And the guy's 18 years old. It's pretty incredible what Wolkow is able to just do from just a knowledge standpoint and just his ability to talk about things on the field, right? Like there's ups and downs. You're going to see a lot of ups and downs with this guy. He's 18 years old. Let's not forget that. He's 6'7". He's massive. He's learning his body almost still. I know that sounds kind of drastic, right? Like he should know how his body works, but like the dude's 18. He really doesn't yet. I think he's still trying to figure out how to maximize his swing and how to, I guess, minimize his swing actually in a funny, not really maximize, reducing his swing and figuring out how to be as compact as possible and make more contact is obviously one of the focal points for him. He's taking everything in stride. I think he understands, since when he first came up, and just generally it's become evident to a lot of pitchers that they're going to throw him very, very off-speed heavy. He faces a ton of breaking balls all the time. He pounds fastballs when he gets them. So he is a guy that at 18 years old is having to adjust to pitchers basically pitching around him in a way, as crazy as it is, because he is an imposing figure. He has the type of power that he has, and people know that he can get a hold of fastballs. If he's ready for a fastball and he gets one, it's probably going pretty far and pretty hard. So really, really impressive player. There's going to be ups and downs. I know the strikeout rate. Yep, it's at like 40%, right? That looks terrible. I get it. this is also a guy that has hit, some of the best exit velocities in the entire farm system at 18 years old in his first professional season, right? Like a lot of people thought he could spend most of the season in rookie ball in Arizona, and he just tore it up to the point where he had to go to Kannapolis early in the season this year and has now spent the rest of the season in Kannapolis, where he's been a good player, right? Like he has ups and downs. There's going to be a lot of swing and miss, but the approach is getting there slowly. You can see the approach involvements. I think Pat Leland, the manager in Kannapolis, was telling me, that George has really developed his approach and his ability to start recognizing pitchers better. It still is going to result in a lot of swing and miss right now and a lot of whiffs, but there's a lot of things growing there. He looks good in the outfield too. He looks really comfortable in right field. His arm is excellent out there. This is a guy that's going to have a plus arm in the outfield, in addition to being fast enough to track balls down with the best of them. He's got sneaky speed for his size too. So, this is one of the highest, if not actually probably the highest offensive prospect in the White Sox system. It's a long road ahead. It's going to take time, but Wolkow is someone that, there is a ton to dream on for very obvious reasons when you watch him and really dive into it.
Yeah, and I consider him a stud. I'm in that area, but I actually have no problem with him with all the swinging right now, because it's a data point, okay? And he's 18 years old, so we now know he's going to swing a lot. Let's see if he can get that to decline as he goes through, because obviously we know he can hit the ball a country mile, and as you've just now given a great report on, he's just got to start hitting that off-speed stuff. How are the rest of the recent draft picks from this year's class looking at Kannapolis? Because I know you talked to a few that are already there.
Yeah, there's a bunch of draft picks there now. So when I was there, there was 6 hitters who originally were sent there a few weeks ago, and then 5 or 4 pitchers just got sent there this past week. So I didn't get to see those guys there, but those guys are settling in well. But from the hitting standpoint, 6 of the hitters from the draft class, 5 draft picks in addition to 1 undrafted free agent. Really some overall solid performances. Everybody's kind of having their own pace, right? There's a lot of guys to get in that lineup right now, because you had a Geraldo Perez come over at the deadline from the Dodgers. Wolkow's obviously there. There's some guys that have come up throughout the season, some guys that have already been there all year, in addition to now 6 draft picks, right? So there's a ton of guys and really just not enough lineup spots to get all these guys every day at bats. So a lot of mixing and matching. You've got your core 4 to 5 players that are playing most days, but then a lot of guys are in and out of this lineup right now, just trying to which makes it a little bit hard to find a rhythm, especially for some of these draft guys who, were some of the best players on their college team and played every single day in college. And now they're in a lineup that has a lot of talent. So you're not able to play every day. Sam Antonacci is one guy who immediately stood out to me from talking to him, from watching him. 5th round picked out of Coastal Carolina. This guy was the JUCO National Player of the Year as a sophomore, transferred to D1. Coastal Carolina, was one of the top batting averages in the entire country last year. Incredibly pure hitter. This is a guy who, if things go well for him, this is kind of your Brooks Baldwin through the minor league type of archetype, and could be, even a little more well-rounded as a player. Antonacci is someone who just makes a ridiculous amount of contact all the time, has a really solid approach. I posted something this past week that he had a 6-game stretch with 8 hits and 8 walks, which is 16 times getting on base within his 6 games in a stretch last week. So this is a guy who, after a week or two of settling in, he looks real good in single A right now, makes a ton of contact, just a lot of singles and doubles, doesn't have a ton of power, but just really natural contact and approach. TJ McCants is another guy that was fun to watch when I was there. He had a home run when I was there as well. Center fielder from Alabama and Ole Miss, played at both those throughout college. A lot of natural pop, an older guy, right? 5th year senior. So he's really gonna, mash. He should mash. I think this is a guy who is going to hit hard, and he probably should move pretty quickly because he is older and has a lot of SEC experience. A really nice twitchy swing for McCants. I like the way, super athletic, great defender in center field. This guy should be a plus defender in center field. So exciting stuff there. Other guys, Lyle Miller Green, Alec Makowicz. There's other guys, Nathan Archer, Jackson Appel. That's the rest of those guys. Generally some impressive stuff, and good to get to kind of talk to all of those guys and hear a little bit about who they are just as players on the field.
Well, I could talk about your trip for another hour, but I only got so much time. So that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. And thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. Now go check out Locked On MLB podcast. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day. You can find the link to Locked On MLB in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I will be back tomorrow. I plan on talking about, is Luis Robert Jr. a superstar player? And also feel free to leave comments about today's discussion with Elijah Evans. And Elijah, first, where can we again find all your great content?
You can find all my stuff on X at Elijah EV8. I post all my articles, interviews with players. I've talked to 20, 30 guys in the farm system this season. So plenty of stuff there. JustBaseball.com, FutureSox.net is where all my writing is. The FutureSox podcast is where I talk prospects all the time and hopefully get your brain off of the current White Sox by talking about the future White Sox. So
And Elijah is a future superstar in the baseball prospect business. He's going to be bigger than Jim Cowles. I'm calling it right now. All that stuff.
That's too high of praise, but I appreciate you, Todd.
Oh man, you do great work. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion with Elijah Evans. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at ToddJDub, or at Locked On Sox. Email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. Have a great day. I will talk to you tomorrow.